Fabulous. So, massive welcome to both of you, Martha and Daz. I'm so excited to be sitting down and speaking to you both today. Um, just a bit of backstory, I guess, for those who are listening in terms of how we met, how we came to be here. So I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Martha and Daz last year. I think it must have been like November, December time.
Yeah.
I had been asked by Culture Central, shout out to them, to deliver some boot camps, one on fundraising, one on business modeling for what they called grassroots arts and culture organizations. And I was just amazed actually by the work that both of you are doing with Calico, how far you've come as an organization in a relatively short space of time. But the thing that particularly struck me about Daz and Martha, which is why I wanted to sit down and speak to the two of you, is the way that you have gone about your organizational growth. So we met, I believe it was actually at the fundraising boot camp that the two of you attended. And full disclosure, when I was initially asked to do that boot camp, I was a bit like, oh man, like fundraising, just because obviously a lot of people know I used to be a fundraiser for a children's charity, worked on big national fundraising campaigns. But my observation of the fundraising landscape as pertains to the charity sector is that it hasn't really changed much in the last, well, forever. I kind of came officially out of the charity sector or working in that space back in 2017, and my observation has been that the fundraising landscape hasn't changed dramatically. So initially, when I was asked to lead that session, my heart sank a little bit because I was like, oh man, like I just feel that a lot of what people are still doing is very outdated, outmoded, not very innovative. Obviously, as you guys know from attending the session, I didn't go down a traditional, here's how to do a fundraising gala or here's
Mm.
how to do, challenge events route. But it was such a breath of fresh air to meet the two of you and to hear about the work that you're doing. And really what I want and my hope for our conversation today is that people will listen to the two of you. No, I said the two of you, so that, these aren't, young women who are running like a massive organization, but the work that you are doing is massive. And so what I really hope is that people receive encouragement, inspiration, actually, dare I say, a provocation to think much more entrepreneurially about how they're running their arts organizations. So preamble over to you ladies. Can you tell us, first of all, about Calico? What is it that you do? What is your mission? What is your vision? How long have you been running?
Sure. So I'm Daz.
My name's Martha.
And as you said, we're the co-founders of Calico. We actually met, we both studied drama at the University of Birmingham, and we started working together then on like theatre projects. In our final year of uni, the murder of Sarah Everard happened, and that obviously had a huge impact on our community of young women. And what we were hearing in response to it was a lot of victim blaming, placing responsibility on Sarah for what happened to her, and not a lot of accountability for people who actually could have done something about it. So in direct response to that, we made a short film while we were at uni called Curfew, and we asked our friends, what would you do if men had a curfew at 6 p.m? And we recorded answers and we brought them to life in public spaces around Birmingham. And we posted it online, and it sparked a lot of really interesting conversations, and it enabled us to reach audiences that we would never reach in like a theatre space. And that essentially was the beginning of Calico. So that was in 2021. And since then, do you want to take over?
Absolutely. Since then, we've been doing a wide variety of projects. We still deliver online video campaigns. So, in line with the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, we delivered a whole campaign around spiking to make spiking a criminal offence in the UK. We still work in theatre, but particularly we love to make theatre pieces that are made for public space. So we reach audiences that wouldn't necessarily come to see a feminist theatre show. And we also, at the start of 2023, decided to put our hat in the ring to develop a virtual reality experience. And we got some funding to do that. And ever since then, we've been using virtual reality as a training tool to deliver violence against women and girls training sessions to policing, transport, and security providers. So we've been on a kind of a real journey of using our creativity in loads of different ways. But all of the aim of Calico and the work we do is to use our creativity to combat gendered violence. That is our mission. our vision is a world without gendered violence, and we see so much power in our creativity to help move towards that aim.
Amazing, amazing. You mentioned there, I mean, I think it's worth first of all just acknowledging your journey started 2021. Obviously, we're in 2025, so sort of 4 years in the game.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me when I was thinking about your organization is you kind of came out of a particular moment socially. So, you know, there was something happening in the zeitgeist in terms of Sarah Everard, and we saw the public outcry in response to everything that happened with her. How has that impacted you as an organization in terms of the fact that you could argue all that moment has quote unquote passed? What has that meant for how you have then progressed the organization forward out of that moment?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and something that we talk about a lot, because I think in the early days of Calico, we were so just responding to what was happening in the world with Sarah Everard, and then with the spiking campaign. That was also because there's a lot of talk in the news about spiking and how it wasn't a criminal offence, and so we were kind of like, yeah, okay, let's get into this conversation. But in the last, I would say, 2 years, we've started thinking really proactively about what we can do to push forward, so we're not always responding to the moment. I mean, obviously gender violence is always an issue, so it's not that the issue is going away, it's just that people's willingness to talk about it kind of ebbs and flows. So how can we think forwards, and really push other people to keep talking about this, even when there's no huge event or thing that's taking over social media at that time?
Yeah.
And obviously you've used the phrase gendered violence, but am I right in thinking that your work is specifically focused on gendered violence against women and girls, or are you also looking at gendered violence as it affects men, trans people, you know, wider communities?
Yeah, very good question. And again, something we talk about a lot. For us, we've landed on the language gendered violence because what we're really focused on is male violence against women and girls, and that includes trans women, non-binary people, people within the LGBTQIA plus community. And what we're specifically focused on is men enacting that violence. The police, West Midlands Police and policing in the UK use the language violence against women and girls to describe, you know, the offences that we're talking about. So quite often we use that language when we're in those spaces. But we see our whole mission as an organisation is around gendered violence.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I asked that question. I suspected that that was the case just from the conversations we've had, but I asked that question because I then wondered about what pushback you might have had, if any, because of that. I mean, you've already talked about the need to sort of code switch and slightly change your language and terminology for the spaces that you're in. Have you encountered pushback from the fact that you say gendered violence, but actually you're focused on women and girls? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
Yes, we have.
Surprise,
We do all
surprise.
the time. Whether it's like in the YouTube comment section of a short film we've made, or in a post-show discussion after a show, or in training sessions sometimes. I think that the concept of two young women coming into a space and talking about something that can feel quite like accusatory. I understand that some people do have their guard up, and we find often that sometimes men in particular are quite, that they assume that we're coming in to attack them. And obviously we then begin the conversation, the intervention, whatever it is that we're doing, and they realize that actually we're not doing that. We're talking about an issue that just factually exists and factually is perpetuated more by men. And then we talk about lived experiences of our community. And so you can't really argue with a lived experience if someone's saying they feel a certain way or something's happened to them. So we find that it can be tricky at first to start those conversations. But once people realize what the aim is and the goal is to reduce violence, that's, you know, how can you disagree? Obviously, some people can disagree with that, but we tend to find that people come around to it.
And also, I think it's, you know, when we in our conversations with people about it, we often, as Daz said, really focus on lived experience, because we see that as where the real power is. But also we always have statistics up our sleeves if that's where the conversation has to go, such as the fact that 1 in 2 women feel unsafe traveling alone after dark. You know, that's a core of the population, and 20% of all crime reported is related to gendered violence. So it is a massive issue. So whilst there are so many other really important horrific things that need to be focused on as well in our society, violence against women and girls, gendered violence is a massive part. So we're really strong in our belief, and we're happy to battle for that as well.
Yeah, and I love that you said you're strong in your belief, because that really comes through. And I think actually it's really important that people don't underestimate the power of conviction, because you're always going to come up against challenges and obstacles and naysayers and people that want to argue with you. But the fact that you have such strong conviction about the work that you're doing and its importance is obviously going to be a massive driving force behind your organization. Can you tell us a bit more then about the art? How does the art play into what you're doing, particularly if you're doing things like training with police officers, for example?
Very good question. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess it's for us as theatre graduates, creativity and the arts has always been at the heart of what we love to do. So I think at the start for us it was, oh, how can we use our creativity to share our lived experience? How can we use our creativity to share the stories of others? Because storytelling is such a powerful tool, especially when it's about, sharing a message. But then in 2023, when we started working on our virtual reality project, we were able to have a few sessions with a wonderful person called Eni Kuka, who is an empathy expert. And she works a lot in the visual art space, and using her creativity to create spaces for people to build empathy. And we spoke to her a lot about her work and her research, and found that actually the power of creativity goes beyond the storytelling and can be used in specific ways to actually build empathy in people's experiences and perspectives on the world. So that I think was a real moment for us to realize that our creativity has real power. And within the training session, we usually deliver a 3-hour training session, and 15 minutes of that is in virtual reality. And all of that virtual reality 15 minutes is around sharing the lived experience of different women and girls, with the aim of building an empathetic understanding of what it's like to be a woman or a girl traveling through a city at night.
But around that's 15 minutes, but the rest of the session we're essentially running drama games. So we're taking those creative skills and those facilitation skills and putting them in an environment where they would never normally exist. And there's real value in that, and that's not something that policing ever see. So for them it's an opportunity also to think really differently about a subject and try and address something in a new way. So it's in the interventions we make, whether that's a film or a VR experience or a show, but it's also in the wraparound and how we hold the conversations and get people to think about the topic.
Yeah, so good, so good, so clever as well to kind of use VR and tech to kind of grab people, but then as you say, that wraparound and that real knowledge that you have of the issues, actually it's just a tool to facilitate the creative storytelling and help people to build that empathetic connection so they understand the issues. One of the things that you said to me when we met, actually, and I think it's good to mention this now, you talked about the fact that your observation had been that it had been much easier to get funding for tech. So for that, actually introducing the VR, having that tech tool and that capability within your offering, it's been much easier to attract funding. Can you just say a little bit more about that? Because I think particularly at the moment, obviously in the last few months, I believe it's the University of Birmingham, possibly in partnership with Coventry, they've launched this new Create Tech program. So we are starting to see the landscape shifting. There's obviously more of a recognition of actually the importance and opportunities around tech. But I just thought it was such an interesting observation that you made when we met.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so we've struggled a lot to get funding for arts things. We've written loads of Arts Council bids that have been rejected, and they take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So we've done a lot of that, and we're finding that really difficult and unsustainable, and we weren't getting to do what we wanted to do, and it was a constant barrier. But when we saw, it was called Creative Catalyst, what we originally applied to, and it was through Innovate UK. And when we saw that fund, we were like, oh, okay, like let's try, like, what if we made a VR experience? Obviously, at that point, we had no idea how to make a VR experience, but we were like, let's budget for some people who would help us make a VR experience, and then put it in and see what happens. And then we got the funding. And since then, there's been, as you're saying, a real trend in funding for innovation, creative tech. And I think obviously the landscape of the world is constantly changing, and tech is just becoming more and more of a thing. And so the arts and culture are starting to think about how that synergizes and how we can embrace some of that creative tech to actually enhance what we're doing in arts and culture, or take it into new audiences. So yeah, it's Create Tech Frontiers, I think, the local funding bit, but there's a few others happening nationally where it's specifically for arts organisations to think about using creative tech, whether that's VR or AR or AI or whatever it is. Just to think about kind of updating the arts in a way. And obviously some of it's not going to work, and there's some things that just are how they are because that's great, like live theatre will always be live theatre, but some things really do work, and they really can help you to see a different perspective on the arts, or find a different audience for your work. So I think, yeah, being open-minded about that has been really beneficial for us.
I also think we, Daz and I founded Calico off the back of COVID-19 as well. So, that first short film we made, I think in an ideal world, we would have loved that to be a theatre piece initially, but that's just something that wasn't possible. So I think our organisation was kind of born at a time where we were always looking for ways we can apply our creativity to perhaps unusual or new ways of doing things. So I think it's kind of in our DNA as an organization as well to do that, and that's something that we have found such huge benefits for, especially even putting a creative spin on a kind of tech bid as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Creative Catalyst was specifically for creative organizations to go into the technical space, but it doesn't necessarily even need to be that. It can just be a tech funding bid that you can implement that creativity into. And again, that's seen as so valuable within that space.
Yeah, and actually I think, again, Daz used the word enhance. And I think it is so important that organizations think about it as enhancing their current offerings, or again, it's a tool to facilitate what you're already doing, but maybe in a slightly different way. Because I can imagine there'll be some organizations listening to this going, we're not using VR, we're not doing that, we're not going to use tech. And just because it might actually feel really, really daunting. Obviously, you talked about the practicality of having to outsource some of that expertise to people who are already working in that space in order to enable you to build that and to position you for that. But I think the key thing is that you were open-minded, as you said, you were open to doing something different and taking a risk and going, oh, actually, this is a completely different landscape. We have no idea about this, but actually, we're just going to go for it and try it. You also talked about the challenge, and that's really what I wanted to I guess hone in on today, around things like Arts Council funding, or what I would call institutional grant funding anyway. We know that since COVID, that landscape has changed dramatically. It has become so much more competitive in terms of the level of demand, the number of organizations looking for funding, but equally in real terms, the actual pots of funding have shrunk. So there's actually less money available. And I was quite irked, it's probably the most accurate word. A few months ago, I was speaking to someone who actually was designing a program for some arts partnership organizations within their region, and we were talking, and the contact said, oh, because it's so difficult at the moment, we really just have to help organizations get better at writing their funding applications. And with all due respect in the world, it doesn't matter how well you write. If there's not enough money to go around, there's not enough money to go around. And so I really, again, just for people listening, I really hope that you're hearing from Martha and Daz that actually you just need to be looking at things differently. I would say this is going to sound really corporate-y, but
No, do it.
in business, thanks, Martha. In business and marketing terms, we talk about what we call blue ocean and red ocean, right? So blue ocean is where there's loads of opportunity. There's hardly anybody in that space. Red ocean is where the waters are literally bloody red because that's where all the sharks are. That's where everyone is swimming. That's where everyone's trying to feed. And I feel that we've come to a place where the grant funding landscape, the institutional funding landscape is very much red ocean. The organizations that are going to thrive in this season and in the coming years are the ones that are in the blue ocean space who aren't afraid to go out where other people aren't at the moment. Again, I think within our sector, there's often this sense of we have to do things the way that everybody does it, or
Yeah.
the way that it's always been done. And actually what we're seeing through you guys as an example is that actually when you take a step out and a bit of a leap of faith and do something different, it can really, really pay off without sacrificing the kind of central mission, vision, because I think that's the other fear sometimes, is that understandably people don't want to get carried away in a direction that isn't true to their vision and mission. What we're saying is that actually you don't have to compromise on that. You can find a way to use these tools to enhance it. We've talked a little bit about the Creative Catalyst program, that particular part of funding, but I also know that as part of your journey, you did actually participate in, I believe it was an incubator program run by the University of Birmingham. I think you told me, and it wouldn't surprise me, that you were the only arts organisation on that program at the
Yeah.
time you attended. So again, tell us a little bit about that experience and again how that has framed and forged your approach to building Calico.
Absolutely. So the University of Birmingham has a whole department for innovation and entrepreneurship. And when we first started Calico, we came across a funding bid through the University of Birmingham where they'll give you £500 to start up your organisation. So we applied to that immediately and used that money to, set up our website, get a hard drive, get our socials sorted, get a, registered office address, all of that jazz, the stuff that we desperately needed to have. And that kind of introduced us into the enterprise community as part of the University of Birmingham. Through then, we came across their Elevate Incubator program, applied to that. I think we were quite wary to apply to that because it was for any business run by a University of Birmingham student or alumni. And I think we automatically thought that it would be primarily for like tech bros and people who wanted to make really high earning organizations. So as a not for profit social enterprise, we were kind of, I think, wary to apply initially. But then we were one of 4 organisations in our cohort to receive a £15,000 scholarship in that year. And I think that was a real moment of realisation for us of like, oh my gosh, that they really see value in what we were doing and they really believed in our mission and vision, which was not as strong as it is now back then.
No.
Not at all. And I think tapping into that community that we were then a part of, where we were the only arts organisation in our cohort, actually made us really, forced us to grow because we were having to constantly explain what we were doing, what our vision for the future is, but we were also having to constantly answer questions like, okay, so how are you gonna grow your income stream? What's your 5-year plan looking like? What does your current cash calculator look like, and how's it going to look like in 5 months' time? And those questions initially were ones that we could not at all answer, but were forced to answer, and that I think gave us the space and time, and especially that £15,000 scholarship gave us the space and the time together to discuss what our dream organisation could look like, and all of the different directions we could be. Have I missed anything?
I don't think so. Well, I guess like when we started out, we would not have said that we were going to run a social enterprise or that we were social entrepreneurs like that. I didn't even know what that was. We were just like theatre makers with a theatre company, and we founded Calico as a CIC because it felt the easiest at the time. Like charity, there seemed to be too much admin, and we were like, let's just get this done. CIC, we had no idea if that would be beneficial or not in the long run. But through the incubator, we've been really pushed to understand what social entrepreneurship is and kind of realize that that is what we're doing and that we want to be doing. And actually, it turns out that the CIC has worked really well for us because we've been able to kind of straddle lots of different spaces and
Yes.
opportunities for funding that we might have not been able to do were we a charity. So yeah, it's been really instrumental in us realizing actually that we are a social enterprise and thinking about how we can sustain ourselves beyond constantly writing funding bids. Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I really loved about you guys, is that you have a social enterprise. Again, I mean, I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox, but anyone that knows me knows I'm always big on, really questioning when organizations are forming. Do you need to be a charity? Is that the best model that's going to serve your mission and serve what you're doing? And again, I think by and large, registering as a charity is the default, but it's probably the default again linked to the funding mindset, which is, well, we need to be a charity because we're going to need charitable donations, and that's going to position us the best to receive those. And actually, you're only thinking that way because it's the way that everyone's always done it. So again, we're in this weird cycle where actually people are probably forming charities and they don't need to. There are so many other ways, including social entrepreneurship, but even potentially being a private limited company, actually that's perfectly fine. I think, again, one of the discussions that we had when I ran the boot camp is the fact that within our space, charities no longer, even social enterprises no longer have the monopoly on social good. We are seeing for-profit companies actually in some cases having greater social impact because they are for profit, but they've designed their business model in such a way that they've built that social impact piece into the work that they do. So yes, they are for profit, but they have also thought a lot about the impacts that they want to make. And so it's really important, if you are in a position where maybe you're in the early days of starting your work, really think carefully about, is being a charity going to be the thing that serves you best? I would say probably not, but it might. It might, but think about it really, really carefully. In terms of the fact that you're a social enterprise, what has that done for you in terms of your governance? Or if, even actually for anyone who's listening and they think, actually, even I don't know what a social enterprise is, could you explain it in Martha and Dad's definition of what a social enterprise is?
Daz is looking at me, so I'll go. Well, I think an interesting place to start is that, to my knowledge, there is no official governance structure for a social enterprise. So, actually, no matter what you are, if you're a limited company, if you're a CIC, anything, you could technically call yourself a social enterprise, which I think is an interesting place to start with.
Yes.
For us as a CIC, we do have governance responsibilities. We have an Articles of Association, and we have do you know what the form's called? I
forgot to do the CIC 34.
Yeah, we have a CIC
Yes.
34 form where we explicitly write out what community we're benefiting, how we're doing that, and where our profits go to support that community, which for us was a great starting point to have a conversation around what actually our mission, vision, and values are. I think one of the things that initially actually scared us away from being a charity is that we, as a charity, you can either be on the board of trustees or you can be a director and work for the company, but it's tricky to be on both. Whereas as a CIC, we don't have to have a specific board of trustees. Daz and I are the directors of the organisation, and we have an advisory board of brilliant experts who support us. But ultimately, we share the governance responsibility of the organisation, which gives us the flexibility to be able to move in a way that we know best serves our community, and kind of adjust how we run, where we get our funds, depending on what is out there. So I think for us, it's been the the governance structure that is most flexible and agile, which as a startup social enterprise, that's what we need to be.
Yes.
Whilst also making sure that at the heart of what we do is written in that CIC 34 form, and that we always stick and know that actually the ultimate aim of our organisation is to support our community. So yeah, I think it's been great to give us that structure, but also that flexibility as well.
Yeah, agree.
Fantastic. One of the things that you said earlier, Martha, when you were talking about your experience of being on the program at the University of Birmingham, you talked about the fact that in the beginning you couldn't answer a lot of the questions when it came to talk about cash
Yeah.
flow and your business model and so on and so forth. As again, I think one of the things I want to highlight is that entrepreneurialism, if that's a word, is a muscle that you can build. It's a muscle that you can flex and build over time as you practice it. But I wanted to ask, if you were starting again now, if you could go back to Martha and Daz in 2021, what do you know now that maybe you wish you had known then, and how might you have done things differently if you could go back in time?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and I think the thing that we landed on is to know that I think when we think of like CEO or director of a company, at least we were thinking like you're going to make big, hard decisions that are going to have huge impacts, and that's your thing, and you're just making these big decisions. And actually, what we found is that we're constantly making really small decisions, like all the time. And that a lot of the decisions that you make, you can undo them. So I
Yes.
think we used to agonize over like, oh, if we do this, it's like you just have to do things and then see how the impact they have, and then think about whether that worked or whether you would do that again, and then adapt and adjust. So maybe just that is that the stakes feel really high, but they're not always that high. And you can change your mind and change what you're doing and adapt and evolve and rethink things constantly. So it doesn't always have to be, this is what we're doing, and being stuck in that.
Yeah. Yeah, most decisions are reversible. And actually, I think going back to that, business planning and cash flows, I think at the very start of our journey, we found it quite hard to do those, primarily because we haven't done that much as an
Yeah.
organization. So it felt quite, we were like pointless, or just, another piece of paper that we had to fill out. And it was like, well, actually, what's the point in any of this? And there was point and use in it at that stage, obviously, because it got us talking about what the vision is. But actually, we found it to be really useful when we did start experimenting and going, well, how about we do just try this project, or we do just apply to this funding bid, and then having those systems to fall back on, such as the business plan and the cash flow, to then use those to reflect upon how that project's gone, allowed us to grow and evolve and learn as we go.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it. I think in the beginning, it can feel very time consuming to
Yeah.
be doing all of this stuff. It can feel quite slow, and that can be quite frustrating and actually quite anxiety inducing. You feel like I just want to crack on with the work. And I think for a lot of organizations, I think there is a fear of slowing down in order to progress. So, given your experiences, what advice would you give to organizations who have perhaps been putting off some of this work on their business strategy, on their cash flow, organizations who are maybe finding it a bit daunting? What would your advice be to them?
Very good question. I think my immediate piece of advice is that a cash flow or a business plan or any of these things don't have to look a certain way. I remember when Daz and I first started, we'd be like, I'd search on Google Images what a cash flow looked like, because I genuinely didn't know, and I was kind of looking for this magic formula of what it could be, and trying to fill in a specific template, so that I could tick off the fact that we'd done a cash flow. But I think actually our cash flows look different every quarter, and if you create them as an organization from the ground up with the central question for, okay, what are we trying to answer through this spreadsheet or template, that will allow you to make something that you are able to interpret and is best set out for you and how your brain works, but also that can then evolve and grow with you. So I think don't look for the magic template that's gonna help you solve it. If it's useful to look at an example at first, that's great. That's what we found. But then actually creating your own, for us, was really useful.
I think for me, like Martha's really good at strategy, like that. Your brain works naturally in like a very like the first thing, if we find out we've got funding, she's like ready to sit down and do the timeline and make that thing. My brain did not used to work like that at all, and I'd be like, stress. And maybe I'm just delusional, but I think now how I see these things, which I actually now really enjoy doing those. That's my favorite part of a project now, is like
Interesting.
laying everything out and thinking about the cash flow and blah blah blah, because it's like the dreaming stage for me of like, okay, we want to do this thing. What if we did it like this? What? And it's all just hypothetical. Like it's not real, which to me makes it easy because you can go back and change it. Things will adjust, you'll change. So it is just like a hypothetical dreamscape of your project that you then change. Like it's not your annual accounts. It's not based on
No.
Yes,
that
yeah.
happened. It's literally you dreaming about what the future is going to be like and how, if you do this thing, will that impact this thing. So I actually find it really exciting now. But I think that's from partly from many years of Martha being like, let's do the cash flow. And now I'm like,
And I think also I think that links. We have a brilliant mentor called Sally Ann Hunter, who we got through the University of Birmingham Elevate program. She's an amazing fundraiser, strategy expert. And she told us that actually a cash flow isn't for anyone else to see but you. Because it is all made up and it's hypothetical and you can have 10 different versions of it. But it's just a really exciting and interesting way to see how a certain decision could impact you in 12 months' time, for example.
I'm so glad that you mentioned mentorship actually, because again, there will be other people in your position who might be part of what is quite a small organization, might be a lone artist actually at this point with just a vision and a dream. So one thing, again, massive encouragement, look for a mentor. A lot of people are very willing to give their time and their expertise away for free. If they believe in your vision, if they can see that you're going to do the work. Obviously, if you do get a mentor, please do what they tell you to do and respect their time. But a lot of people are really willing to do that. So that's definitely something that you can do that won't necessarily cost you money, but it's another way of kind of almost expanding your resource and the people that you've got around you. Again, you ladies talked about having an advisory board. Again, that's another really good way to get other heads and other ideas in on what you're working on. So yeah, we'll definitely advocate for people to take advantage of those opportunities as well. One question I want to ask you is, and this is maybe slightly leading question, but given your experiences, so you've talked about mentorship, you've talked about your advisory board, you've talked about having this program to support you. What tricks do you think potentially people in our sector are missing at the moment when it comes to the way that they're building their organizations and the way that they're looking at their planning and their progress and how they're setting out their work?
I think what we talked about before is not understanding the value of creativity, because I think that's something that we've come to find over the last few years is it's easy to think of the arts and culture sector as it's a separate entity from the rest of the world, and think about creativity as something that happens in certain spaces with certain audiences, and that's it. But what we found is that applying that into other contexts is actually where it can have the biggest impact, and that it's not, I mean, you were saying this before, Kerry, like it's not necessarily sacrificing your creative or artistic integrity. Like there's so much excitement that we find in creating the interventions for policing teams or for whoever it is. So like applying that can open up new funding streams, you can shift your business model, all of that stuff, but it's about just knowing that there's value and that people will value those creative skills outside of the arts and culture. You just have to speak their language a little bit in the first instance and make them understand that actually what you're doing is helpful to them. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so in terms of your works, let's bring it back to Calico at the moment specifically. What are you most excited about at the moment in terms of what you've got on the horizon and what you're working on?
Ooh,
Very good question.
there's two key things in my mind.
Go on.
Number one is we haven't just started it, but we've just had a press release about our work we're doing with West Midlands Police in VR. So we're training all the new recruits that they have up until April, and we're hoping that that will be the first for many. So our dream is to train all police new recruits across the UK. So I'm excited for that to happen because it's definitely going to happen imminently, I'm sure.
Dream big. And also literally last weekend we performed version 10 of a theatre piece that we've been working on since we graduated from university. So theatre is still at the heart of what we do. And so we created a 30-minute outdoor theatre show called Curfew, which is all around still what would happen if men had a curfew at 6 p.m. And we brought that to a public space in Bristol this weekend. And we had really great feedback. And alongside that, we also delivered a workshop around how powerful our body and our voice is in defending ourselves. So we run this workshop called Bash, which is all around self-defense for the dance floor. We taught that as well in Bristol, which was really good fun. And I think we're at a really exciting time now where we feel like all of these things that we've been working on for so many years are coming together, and we're able to show them to the world and share them with as many people as possible.
And it feels like we might not have to write another Arts Council bid for the show, which would be really great because we've had this like 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times.
And then we were like, no, we just need to do it now. So we just did a DIY, really low budget version of it, and it went really well. And now we're thinking that if the VR goes how we anticipate, we'll be able to self-fund the theatre stuff, so it can still be free for the audience, which is the ultimate goal. So that feels like it's actually somewhat reachable now.
That is incredible. That is incredible because I didn't hone in on it at the time. But one of the words you mentioned earlier, Daz, was sustainability. And again, it's that lack of sustainability of being caught in this funding cycle where actually, even if you are successful in getting funding once, there's no guarantee that you're going to get it again. Your ability to be able to plan ahead is completely curtailed. Just without obviously giving away kind of your, anything commercially sensitive, but you talked about potentially the VR work giving you the ability to self-fund. Can you just explain literally in terms of cash and income, how that would work? Again, for people thinking, well, this all sounds really nice, but I don't understand how these young ladies are making any money. Can you just explain a little bit about how that model would actually work in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I guess it's currently working on a small scale right now in that we have signed a contract with West Midlands Police to deliver our training to every single new recruit that they hire throughout this financial year. What that physically means is Daz and I go into their training suite every other week and we deliver a 3-hour training session. And we signed a contract with them which lasts for a year. That contract gives us the funding to be able to put myself and Daz on a small part-time contract, and that work we are able to then attract other funding bids to supplement our day-to-day runnings. So we currently have a grant from Co-op's Young Game Changers Fund, which is for young people who are running projects all around the power of youth voice, and as 25-year-olds we just about fit into that, and so the work we do with West Midlands Police has allowed us to attract that funding. And basically we're able to give ourselves a salary from that work to also do stuff such as our theatre piece and our workshops, which we still get small pots of funding for, but don't give us that capital to be able to put ourselves on a substantial salary, if that makes sense. So in a long-term vision, we have a dream of, as Daz said, training all policing teams across the country, perhaps having hubs in North Midlands, south of the UK, being able to hire local freelancers and facilitators, theatre facilitators, to run that training for their local policing teams, and to be able to give those creative salary to be able to not only just do that facilitation work, but to do their own projects as well.
I think it's key also to remember that just because you're not for profit doesn't mean you can't make any profit on anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
You can make profit on something and funnel it into something that's equally valuable, but it's difficult to get the money for.
Yeah.
So, West Midlands Police are paying for our workshops. They're also paying for continued focus group insights, us building our community through the performances and the conversations that we have, and they get to benefit from that, which is brilliant. But essentially that work wouldn't be able to happen without the investment of West Midlands Police into the training and into the community focus groups that we do have. So yeah, it's about like balancing that in terms of impact and how you can have the biggest impact with the least amount of time spent writing funding bids and Yeah.
Honestly, for me, what everything you've just said is absolutely incredible. So just for absolute clarity, you are delivering this incredible, impactful work. Well, I mean, to have the ability to train every single new recruit,
Yeah.
that is huge. For like, let's just acknowledge that is massive. That is a massive level of impact and influence. But not only are you having that massive level of impact and influence, you are being paid to have that level of impact and influence because, as you rightly said earlier, there is value in the expertise and the creative skills that you offer. So you're being paid to do that work, which is still very much ticking your mission and vision boxes. It's not compromising on any of it. If anything, it's enabling you to have the reach faster, bigger, more effectively. In that process, not only have you been able to give yourselves a salary, which you rightly deserve, because you also have to eat and make a living, you have been able to hire freelancers. And the irony of that for me is that so many, the Arts Council in particular, will often, and other funders will put in their applications, how is this work going to create work opportunities for other freelancers in the industry? And it's a really important question to ask. But what is so interesting is that you have been able to do it without having to go through an institutional funder. You've done it by packaging up your work, your expertise, your creativity into a commercial offering that genuinely has value. And I think this is where I would love to see so many organizations making this switch from we're not chasing funding, we're attracting income by putting out something that is of value, where we can show that this is a model that works, we can show that it has impact. And it sounds like it should be like everybody should be doing it, but the fact is, as a sector, we're not. And this is the shift that I really, really hope people will start to make. And I love what you shared, and I can't tell you how valuable it is to hear from people who are actually doing this. This isn't a pipe dream, this isn't blue sky thinking, it's not really corporate and icky. And like you say, you can make money just because you don't exist for profit. It doesn't mean you can't make money. Money is a tool. Money enables things. And so actually, if you're able to generate income in a sustainable manner, it will enable the visions and the missions that so many of these incredible organizations like yours, like the work that they're actually doing is incredible. They just don't have the resources to fund it and keep it going, which is a real shame. Before I let you go, I just want to give you an opportunity to plug if there are any partnerships or anything or opportunities that you're looking for at the moment, or if you are looking for any new hires or freelancers, or, like you talked earlier about getting the VR person. I know that particular thing is extant now, but is there anyone that you're looking to work with that you would like the opportunity to plug while we've got you?
Very good question. I mean, if any police forces are listening, you know where we're
Yes.
at.
Get signed up.
Literally come to us. Out or beyond that, any public sector organisations. We're suddenly we're interested in how we can implement our training not only in policing but also in organisations that have any sort of responsibility of public space, such as street pastors or transport providers. Anyone who's got kind of a responsibility of public space, we know that our training has value. But also we've started working with the University of Birmingham on looking at how our virtual reality could be used as a community building tool for grassroots organisations in the West Midlands.
Fantastic.
To talk about how gendered violence, happens in their community, and how we can make communities safer for women, girls, and LGBTQIA plus folks. So if there's any grassroots organisations with an interest in working with us or experiencing the virtual reality as well, please do give us a shout.
Yeah, we're doing some focus groups to try and build a bit of a community network to understand, how we could use virtual reality in a slightly different way, rather than as a training tool for police. Can it be more of a community building tool? So we're researching that, and we'd love to collaborate with anyone who might have any thoughts on that at all, really.
Fantastic. Well, Martha and Daz, honestly, thank you so, so much for everything you shared today. It's been so lovely to have the opportunity to speak to the both of you. And I am confident that anybody listening will have been inspired and, as I say, hopefully provoked to think differently about how they're building their organisations and attracting income rather than chasing funding. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's been great.
It's been really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.